Hello, welcome to Sound Off with System 1. I'm your host, Krista Kornchuk, and I'm here today with our panel of experts to discuss your biggest interview and resume questions. That means if you're tuning in live, you can send us your most pressing job search related questions and we'll answer them. Before we get started, here are a few words about System 1. System 1 is a leading provider of specialized, highly technical outsourced services and workforce solutions to critical infrastructure, technology, life science, and government sectors, putting more than 650 employees and 9,000 contractors to work in the United States, Canada, and the UK. As you're joining us today, please tune in the comments. Our marketing team will be monitoring them. Let us know where you're joining from and what industry you work in. And as I said before, we encourage you to send us your most pressing job search related questions, as this episode is a live Q&A. Before we get started with those questions, I'm going to have our panel of experts introduce themselves. They're also going to be sharing their hot jobs, which you can find by scanning the bottom of the screen, or you can visit jobs.system1.com. Melissa, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm Melissa McNally, Senior Recruiter with Alta IT, and we're out of the Washington, D.C. area. I am looking for a core .NET developer for a federal end client in Merrifield, Virginia. And we're looking for someone with about 7 years of experience. The work will be on site for the first 60 days or so, and then it'll be 2 days a week hybrid.
Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Losowitz, Recruiting Manager of Jolay's National Accounts team. Our team focuses on contract staffing for positions within the life sciences field. I've been with Jolay for almost 5 years now, and I'm based out of our Edison, New Jersey branch. Today, I'd like to highlight an exciting opportunity we have with one of our global pharma companies in the Warren, New Jersey area. This role is a contract QA engineering specialist position and will be part of their cell therapy manufacturing team. They do require a bachelor's degree in engineering or the life sciences and a minimum of 6 years of experience working within the pharma industry. They'd also love candidates who have experience providing quality oversight on tech transfers and strong technical writing. So if you're interested in this position, please connect with me on LinkedIn.
All right, my name is James Byers. I'm Director of Recruiting for our Transit Division, and my hot job for today is based in Toronto. It is a security analyst with one of our rail customers. We're looking for somebody with at least 2 years of rail experience, a CPP or a CPTED certification, and also a professional engineering license. And I'm based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. And as I said before, you can view jobs by scanning the QR code up top, not at the bottom, or you can visit jobs.system1.com. And before we get started with our questions, I'm going to have our experts share a job tip. This is a great time for you to send in your questions now while our experts are sharing the job tips. So please send them on in and we will put them on the screen once we get through the tips. Melissa, we'll start with you.
Sure. So my tip for the new year is to refresh your reference information. It's really important to have contacts updated, make sure your references are relevant to your current skills, and that they'll still speak with potential employers on your behalf. Sometimes things move a little quickly during the interview process, and that's not really the time to then reestablish contact with them. We'd like to have that information ready, and I know it makes you rise to the top of the stack as a candidate if your references are readily available to speak well of you. Thanks.
Yeah, that was a great tip, Melissa. My tip would be, just keeping in mind the market has been extremely tough, but we are starting to see things pick up. So remaining positive and continuing to apply to positions that pique your interest. But while you're applying, be realistic with your qualifications and skill set. So, if you're applying to jobs that are within your wheelhouse or you don't have the basic qualifications for, you might not be contacted or you might be, rejected, and that can be defeating. So be realistic and then also utilize a recruiter to help you find the best matches for your next opportunity or the next steps in your career.
All right, and to piggyback off of Colleen's tip, I would also say avoid applying to multiple positions with the same company. You want to wait until you get that first contact either with a recruiter or an interview with the hiring manager to express your interest in some other roles that might be relevant to your experience.
Those are fantastic tips. Thank you. And Colleen, I want to circle back tip you just gave us, what if someone doesn't have all of the qualifications, but maybe some of the qualifications? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say if, 5 qualifications are listed and you have 3 or 4 of them, I would still apply to the position, because training might be available to help you with that other thing that you're not. Maybe don't check that box. Or if you have, maybe transferable skills that could make up for that. I definitely still recommending applying for it, because you should at least make that connection with a recruiter, and they can kind of determine if you're going to be a good fit or not.
Fantastic. And it looks like we have a question coming in. Is asking how to deal with overqualified thought or comments.
I'd be glad to tackle this one. I would say be flexible. And that would be a time to, discuss, where using a recruiter is very, very helpful. Discuss with your recruiter your flexibility in the position. And, sometimes if you've been in the market for a long time, you might be more expensive than the rate range. Express that early on so that the recruiter can go to the client on your behalf.
All right, and to add on to that too, I would say that a lot of times the thought is with an overqualified candidate that they may be at risk of leaving as soon as they find a position that they are, more qualified for. So also express your commitment to that company and the position that you're interviewing for.
Fantastic. We have another question coming in from Christine. What are some suggestions for courses or upskilling that are recommended in this market?
I know LinkedIn and Indeed offer a number of different courses. So I definitely recommend checking those out. And, if you've ever thought about continuing your education, whether that's within a certification program or, a master's degree, I definitely recommend looking into that as well, especially if you haven't, been in a job in quite some time. It just shows the hiring manager you've taken the time to keep yourself up to date with things going on in the field.
I'd say on the IT side too, professional certifications are important. Some hiring managers really want to see, for instance, new cloud certifications, or just, again, ways that you are maintaining your knowledge of current technologies out in the market.
Yes, and continuous improvement is always a plus, and that can also keep you from staying stagnant in the role you're currently in as well.
Fantastic. We have a question coming in from Allie. She wants to know, how can job seekers leverage LinkedIn and other social media platforms during their job search? Great question, Allie.
Go ahead, Melissa. Were you going to say something?
I didn't know if anybody else was going to jump in, but I would definitely recommend following the job postings, especially on Alto or any of the System 1 postings. Definitely keep an eye on those, and again, apply to those that you feel will be a good fit for your background. I would also use features like Open to Work, making sure your resume is updated, and even posting your most updated profile. That way, when recruiters are searching, you'll come to the top of the stack and will know that you're open to work and available.
Yep. And just to piggyback off of that, connect. If you can connect with a recruiter and, their network, it's definitely going to put you out there and help make those connections faster so that we can get you set up with the right opportunity.
Yeah, and my biggest tip would also be the Open to Work banner that you can put on there, because a lot of times when we're searching LinkedIn, we're looking at those candidates first, thinking that they're going to be the quickest to reply and the most interested in the position. And you can also do that secretively, so your current company doesn't necessarily need to know that. It's only visible to recruiters.
That's really good to know. I did not know about that feature. We have another question coming in. Should a resume be more than one page? I always love this question.
I think it can be. I don't think it should be extensive. I would say if you're going, over 2-3 pages, then you may want to cut things back. I recommend to at least put the last, 7 to 10 years of your career on a resume, just because most of our clients are looking back that far. So I would say if it's going to go more than that, maybe consolidate it.
I would say
Yeah.
in the IT space, definitely 10 years back, with some level of detail, especially the technologies that you're working with. And then after that, just maybe briefer bullet points, more brief bullet points.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes one is not enough, but like Colleen said, over two or three can definitely get excessive. We get a lot of resumes sometimes where a candidate might list every single project that they've had with one company, and that can really make it excessive. So anything you can do to shorten it to 3 pages or less is definitely more efficient.
Definitely. And just ask yourself, is this relevant experience to the position that I'm applying for?
Correct.
Which brings me to my next question, kind of resume related. Tracy's wondering, should resumes be customized for every job applied to, and what are the best ways to do so?
I'll say if you're going to customize your resume for every job applied to, that might get confusing for you. But I would also not, I would not over elaborate on things that you're not able to speak to. So if you're just putting things on your resume because you had some knowledge of it or familiarity with it, but you can't speak to actual concrete experience you had with it, I would maybe leave that off of your resume.
Yeah, I agree. I think a general overview of your most relevant experience is important. The only time we would really ask for further information, again, on the IT side, is whether you may have used a certain tool or not. And you're like, oh, yes, I used that in XYZ job. We would just want you to update your resume to reflect that. But we don't like to see a whole lot of different resumes, because then it gives us pause as to why they would be completely different resumes for the same jobs that you worked.
Yeah, and I would say, your experience is your experience. If you have some crossover skills that may, maybe you have a sales resume and you have a recruiting resume, but everything is very similar on there. Yes, you could customize it for that, but at the end of the day, if we see more than one resume for a candidate, it makes you think and really sit back and say, is this candidate being truthful with what they're putting on one of these resumes or all 10 of these resumes? So I would try to keep it to one.
That makes sense. And I think highlighting skills relevant to that position makes a difference too, because I have a sales resume and I have a marketing resume, and different skills are being utilized. But great advice. Stanley is asking, how do you make your resume suitable for AI systems or compliant for automated systems? Great question, Stanley.
I would say really just making sure, like, again, for an IT resume, that your buzzwords are in there. So if you want, for instance, like an applicant tracking system to pick up your resume, just to make sure that your technical buzzwords are in there for whatever technologies that you're using. Or even a non-technical resume, if you're finance and accounting or something, making sure some specific words related to that type of role are on the resume. It should pick up. Our applicant tracking system is really good at picking up resumes.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I would agree with that also. I mean, you want to make sure that any relevant buzzwords from that job description that actually coincide with your skills are on your resume.
Fantastic. And Rich wants to know, how important are cover letters these days? Are they still an important part of a job application?
I know for my group, a lot of clients just really like to see the resume, but I do like a good cover letter because I think a lot of good details are always listed in them. So I would say if you've got a well put together cover letter, include it when you're sending it over to us. Because it does give some more information as to you as an employee and as a person. It shows kind of both sides of things.
Yeah, I think they're important. We do a cover sheet for every resume that we send out to a client. So if you have some brief summary, that's always helpful for us to use when we're writing our own summaries. Other things that we do are like a technical summary, again, for IT resumes. So any information you can provide is helpful.
And I would say they're important, but it also depends on the position that you're applying for. If a higher level position, yes, you definitely want to have a resume. Somewhere in the entry level or mid, your cover letter may not get read by the recruiter as they're looking for candidates to match that position.
Good to know. And I think it's definitely better to make life easier for your recruiters. They're helping you get a job. So great insight. Jessica wants to know, how can candidates address gaps in their resumes or limited experience during interviews? Great question.
I'll start with this one. I think it's important, if you do have a gap in your resume, address it up front in the beginning of the interview. Make sure you go into that interview with the good reasoning why you have that gap. And as long as you can kind of tell the story to it and it makes sense, a lot of times it shouldn't matter if your experience is relevant to the position.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so many valid reasons why one might take some time from work. Many family situations require your full attention, and it could be for a year or more. So it's perfectly okay to mention that ahead of time.
Yep, I would agree. And also just mention, I see a lot of resumes that may leave positions off that weren't relevant to the industry, which then makes it look like you have a gap on your resume. So I would say that's doing a disservice to you, because the manager wants to see continuity in work history, whether that was in pharma or if you worked in food service, whatever it is. I would still at least add it onto your resume in a separate section so they can make the connections that you didn't have a long gap in work history.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to a gap, it's important to keep in mind that most people will have one at some point or another. So you're not alone, and most likely someone will be very understanding. Victoria wants to know, is it advisable to follow up directly with the hiring manager after an interview? Great question.
I'll field this one. I would let your recruiter do that, actually. I would always recommend a thank you note. And if you could write your thank you note and send it promptly to your recruiter, they'll send that on to the hiring team and any other relevant people that you met during the interview process. But what we don't want is the hiring manager to feel a little bit cornered by that's where your recruiter is there to be a buffer between the candidate and the hiring manager.
Yeah, I agree. If you're working with a recruiter, definitely let them handle that. Send your thank you notes directly to them and let them be the intermediary. But if you're not working with a recruiter and the hiring manager has opened it up to you to contact them, then I think it would be suitable. But at the same time, you also want to wait at least 48 hours before you make that contact, ask for feedback.
Perfect. We have an IT question coming in. What professional organizations or networking events would you suggest for someone building a career in IT support?
I'll field this one, if that's all right. I would say definitely keep an eye on the networking events in your local area. So if for instance, we're in the DC area, I would look for either Northern Virginia, Maryland, or DC related IT organizations. If you search LinkedIn for your specific technologies, a lot of those types of organizations will come up. I would say for more like an online organizations, again, LinkedIn is really your best resource for that. And again, keeping in mind with, if you're a Microsoft person or a Linux person, just, keeping your eye out for organizations that help that.
Definitely. Sorry, Colleen, go right ahead.
I was going to say, just to piggyback off of that, within the pharma industry, if you follow us on LinkedIn, Jolay or System One, we have tons of networking events going on this year. So that's a great way just to get some more information and meet some new people.
Perfect. And I was just going to say, utilize LinkedIn groups as well. Not only are there LinkedIn groups for industries, but there are LinkedIn groups for your local area. So you might find important resources on your industry. Owen is asking, what is the single biggest change in hiring trends that you anticipate happening in 2025? And how do I best position myself to take advantage of the change?
In IT, we're seeing return to office as a hybrid probably is the biggest change. We were remote for such a long time. And I think companies are still wanting to give people a lot of flexibility, but really want that connection and engagement. So that is really what we're seeing the most in the IT space.
Yeah, and I would actually agree with that, Melissa. I think that is probably, one of the biggest things right now is, hybrid, remote, or work on site. I would say, if you are looking for a new position, you need to be open to going back to the office, to working hybrid, more than 3 days a week in the office. Those changes are definitely coming back. Now, there is still plenty of positions that offer remote, but you are going to limit yourself if that's all you're seeking.
Yep, and in the pharma space, I would agree with that as well. And also, we're seeing a lot of contract and contract to hire versus direct hire opportunities. So, maybe being open to that. A lot of our employers are looking to, just assess performance, fit on the team, things like that to start out. But we do have a pretty high conversion rate. So definitely keep your options open and do consider contract or contract to hire positions.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And Meet wants to know, how do you describe the perfect cold email to a recruiter? Good question.
I would say you definitely want to have your resume attached. Introduce yourself, what locations you're looking to work in, what kind of positions you're looking for, and just, mention that you're looking to have a conversation. You want to, get any kind of tips on your resume or anything that you might have open, but, have your resume on there so we know what kind of individual we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point about location, especially as we have a lot of return to office. I get lots of resumes that don't have a location, and it's really tough to prioritize those over ones where we know the person's in a place where we're staffing a role.
Perfect. And how can candidates effectively follow up after an interview without seeming pushy? Great question, Jessica.
I think that goes back to the thank you note. That just is a very nice way of you thanking them for their time, showing you're interested in the position. And then I would say give your recruiter time to get that follow up and that feedback for you. So I wouldn't follow up every single day. I would definitely give them, at least 48 hours, maybe 72, just to get that feedback for you.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, there's a fine line between being very interested and being pushy. So get focus on getting feedback from your recruiter, and then also give them time to get the feedback and get back to you. At least 48 hours, and then and if the recruiter gives you a different timeline after that, respect that timeline before you reach out again.
Yeah, very true. We want feedback too, very, very much, and we want things to move along, but sometimes there's just nothing we can do to get that moving any faster.
Understandable. And what is the best way to explain a layoff for a couple of months as a job seeker? Is it in the resume? Is it in the interview?
I would say it's absolutely okay to put a quick note on your resume and bring it up in the interview. It just goes back to that gap in employment. There are so many legitimate reasons why one might be out of work for a little while, and it's really okay. What employers don't really want to see is that habitually. But again, if it's once or twice in your career, that's perfectly okay.
Yep, and I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And we have a compensation question. If you're being asked about a compensation rate for a position with a range, how would you answer that?
I would be honest about your expectations, and also if you do have any flexibility. So it really helps us out when we're trying to identify positions for you. We don't want to send you anything that would be below your minimum, but if it's a position that offers hybrid or remote flexibility, do you have flexibility on your rate? So I would definitely be upfront, open, and honest, because you wouldn't want to get to the point of an offer and then, try to negotiate from there. We want to, know what you're looking for right from the beginning.
And also make sure your range is reasonable and there's not a big gap in between. If you say I'm looking for anywhere between 100 and 150, you're going to get an offer for 100.
Makes sense. All right. I know there have been some tech layoffs lately. So Floyd wants to know, is it a negative perception if you've been with an organization for 10 plus years and you're part of a recent tech layoff? And is this going to narrow your job search or industry?
Not in my opinion. I've been with Alta for more than 10 years, so I hope it doesn't bode negatively on us. But no, if you were a great employee and you're doing meaningful work for all of those years, that's great experience. When I'm looking at resumes, I look for good job tenure. I mean, that can be anywhere from a few years to many, many years. And really, I'm looking for skills. First and foremost, I need great technical skills and relevant technical skills to what the client's looking for. So no, I don't worry much about whether you were laid off in a big layoff or anything like that.
Yeah, and I would say 10 years with an organization is a big plus, a much bigger plus than the negative of being laid off. Shows a lot about the person and their loyalty and their commitment. So I don't think you have anything to worry about with that.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. We have a question about applying for multiple positions. When a company has advertised positions requiring similar skills, why is it not recommended to apply to multiple positions?
Well, that was one of my tips. And I would say as a recruiter, we're going to think about you for multiple positions if we feel that you fit all of those openings. You don't want your resume to pop up every time you open up a different position and look at the candidates. If we saw your resume on position A and we think you're a fit and we think you could potentially be a fit for position B, we'll talk to you about that. We'll talk to the hiring managers about that. Nobody wants to see your resume on position A, B, C, D, and E.
Perfect.
Let us do the work for you, essentially.
Yeah, and it may turn the hiring manager off if you're applying internally. For multiple positions, it might show that you don't have, that clear vision of what you're looking for, and you're just applying to everything. So, like we said, just let us, handle that for you.
And there's a certain level of like desperation. You don't want to seem like you're just willing to take anything, and you just have to get it right this second. Even though sometimes that might be the case, it's better to just stay more reserved and talk to your recruiter about that.
Right.
Yeah, utilizing a recruiter is important. So let them do the work. They'll know what's best, especially for that company and that hiring manager. We have time for one more question. It's about transitioning careers. Ara is wondering, what is your perspective about a nurse with 10 years of experience wanting to transition into IT, as in healthcare or data analytics? Is it appropriate to mention my experience as a nurse, even though I have no hands-on IT experience?
I think you'd have to mention your nursing experience without any IT experience, because you'd have to have some experience to show. But the best way to word that would be registered nurse transitioning into an IT career, recent certifications in whatever new technologies you'd like to get into, and then describing your nursing experience. But you have to have something to show for your resume.
Right. And I think it also would be a benefit to have that hands-on experience in the healthcare industry if you're applying to an IT position in that field. That can give you the leg up. If you're applying with other, quote unquote entry level into IT, that could give you the leg up from another candidate.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to the tip I gave in the beginning of this about being realistic, with your skill set. So I definitely think it's appropriate to mention your experience as a nurse, but, be realistic with the fact that you're probably going to have to start out in an entry level role, which will come with entry level, salary and things of that nature. So just being realistic about making that transition will go a long way.
Definitely. And we do have past Sound Off with System 1 episodes about transferring careers and transferable skills, as well as some blogs on LinkedIn and our website. So be sure to check those out. We are out of time for today, but thank you to everyone who commented. Thanks so much to our panel. Some really great advice. Don't forget to follow System 1 on LinkedIn if you're not already, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can view past episodes. Make sure you tune in to Sound Off with System 1 every first and third Friday at 2 p.m. for more job seeker tips. Our next episode will be Friday, April 7th at 2 p.m., and we're going to be discussing top skills companies look for in 2025. See you then.
Thanks, everyone.